primary goal of sex is giving sexual satisfaction to your spouse. This principle is taught in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. In chapter 6, Paul has been describing some of the basic aspects of marital sex. He mentions the oneness that occurs when a man and woman are joined sexually. He talks about the misuse of the sexual relationship outside of marriage. In chapter 7, he talks about ways to avoid fornication. Finally, Paul describes the sexual relationship between the husband and wife. Each has a responsibility. Paul speaks to the husbands first, and then to the wives. And what he says to one, he says to the other. The same command is given to both husbands and wives. 1 Corinthians 7:3 says that the husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise the wife also to her husband. The word duty in the context of this passage refers to the good that results from the sexual relationship. The wife will receive something good from her husband. Likewise, the husband will receive something good from his wife. The good means to satisfy her or him sexually. Notice it says that the husband must fulfill their duty. The wife or the husband must fulfill their duty. Each have an obligation under God to provide the satisfaction of their spouse's sexual desires. To fulfill one's duty to their spouse means to give yourself fully, joyfully, enthusiastically, and without any hesitation. Both are given the responsibility of keeping the other sexually satisfied. Obedience to that command is important. It's important in preventing one's spouse from satisfying their sexual desires when they're tempted to go outside their marital relationship. Again, the focus is on your spouse. Love is always other-oriented. It's never self-oriented. John 3:16 teaches us the primary definition of love is giving. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. Galatians 2:20 tells us that Christ loved me and gave himself for me. Acts 20 verse 35 says, remember the words of Jesus. It is more blessed to give than receive. In other words, the greater blessing or pleasure that we receive is through giving. With that in mind, we understand the basis for sex, and the goal of the sexual relationship is giving and not getting. Books such as the 5 Love Languages teach people that if you desire your spouse to show you love, then you show love to your spouse. In other words, the husband does the loving thing for his wife, so his wife will in turn do the loving thing for him. The husband's motive is selfish. It's giving to get, giving to his wife for the purpose of getting something in return. You see, doing something which in and of itself may be good is sinful when it's done with a selfish motive. 1 Corinthians 13:5 tells us love does not seek its own. And a man or woman who's doing something good toward their spouse with the motive of getting something is certainly seeking his own. The motive is always to please God and neighbor. In other words, your spouse. The pleasure you receive from sex is part of God's design. It's good. But remember, your pleasure should not be the guiding principle or goal of the sexual experience. The pleasure you receive is a byproduct of pleasing your spouse. Another way of saying it is, the guiding principle of our sexual relationship is based on the same principle the Bible teaches us about all areas of life. It teaches us that real, true and lasting satisfaction is not based on what we get, but on how we please God and by giving to others. A husband that tries to manipulate his wife for sex is sinning. A wife that attempts to manipulate her husband with sex is sinning. A husband that only shows affection toward his wife when he wants sex displays a motive of selfishness. He's obviously giving to get. And by the way, his wife knows it. The biblical principle is he is to show love and affection without an ulterior motive of getting something in return. Now, there may be a time when a husband or wife desires to have sex, but their spouse for some reason doesn't want to. In that case, you express to her or him your love and willingness to go to sleep. Just turn over and go to sleep. If the urge is strong, it may be difficult to turn over and go to sleep, but it's not impossible. The fact that he or she has not been satisfied does not justify an attitude of anger and bitterness. Let me ask you a question. Do you need sex or do you desire sex? I think at this point we need to distinguish between needs and desires. To say, I need sex is inaccurate. You may desire sex, but you don't need sex. So what's the difference? Well, a need is something that if it's not satisfied can cause physical harm or eternal harm. You need water, you need food, and you need rest and so on. If you don't get water, food, and rest, it can cause you physical harm, even death. A person needs Jesus. If they do not trust him as their Savior, it will cause eternal harm. Being deprived of sex will not kill you, and it will not cause eternal harm. You may have a desire for sex, but not a need for sex. To claim sex as a need, and if it goes unsatisfied can cause emotional problems, is an idea the world promotes. It's used to manipulate another person into satisfying one's sexual desires. It's selfishness. To not get one's sexual desire fulfilled is not an emotional problem. Self-discipline, which the Bible repeatedly encourages, is part of the sanctification process. It's part of spiritual growth and Christ-likeness. It's not harmful. To summarize, the primary goal of the sexual relationship is meeting the desires of your spouse. The focus is not on what you get out of sex, but what pleasure you give to your husband or wife. The pleasure you may receive is secondary. The goal is giving pleasure. You can help my channel grow by selecting like and follow. Share this video with your friends. And once again, thank you very much for watching.